Today, we are going to talk about something that almost every new improviser struggles with. And that is when you see a chord with a root like D sharp or G sharp, and you think to yourself, what the hell is a D sharp or G sharp scale? Those don't even exist. Now, obviously we can call a D sharp an E flat and a G sharp an A flat, and those scales do exist, but why are they written in music as scales that don't exist? For this video, we are gonna have a constant mantra, and that is that chords are never random. They are always working together. For all of our examples today, we are gonna use the first 8 measures to the jazz standard Autumn Leaves, and we are gonna use this standard because this is the tune where chords that don't have an actual scale, kind of like D sharp and G sharp, pop up for the first time when you are learning how to improvise. Okay, before we talk about these D sharps and G sharps, let's start at the very beginning so that we can talk about how these chords are working together. Chords always work together in tonal centers. Tonal centers are when all of the chords are working together around the one chord, the tonic chord, the home chord, the root chord, the main chord. So you have this main chord that all of the other chords are working around. Now, when you are playing a pop song, something with a really easy chord progression, you generally only have one tonal center. When it comes to jazz tunes, you will oftentimes have multiple tonal centers. So you'll have one set of chords that are all working together around one tonic or tonal center, and then they'll transition to another group of chords that are working together around a different tonal center or tonic chord. Now that might sound a little confusing, but as we work through Autumn Leaves, you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about. So let's take a look at the beginning of the chord changes to Autumn Leaves and see if we can figure out our first tonal center. So we start off with an F sharp minor 7, then a B7, and then an E major 7. Now, there are a couple chords that should ring alarm bells that let you know what's going on in that chord progression. And one of them is the major 7 chord. When you have a major 7 chord, oftentimes that is your one chord. That is your tonal center. That is what all the other chords are working around. So if we have this E major 7 chord and it is the tonal center, let's take a look at how the F sharp minor 7 and the B7 are related to the E major 7. So the F sharp minor 7 is the 2 chord. The B7 is the 5 chord, and then that would make the E major 7 chord the 1 chord. So this is a very standard chord progression in jazz, which is the 2-5-1. 2-5-1s are everywhere, and the more you start looking at how chords all go together and how they're working together, the more often you're going to see these really common patterns. Now, there are 3 really easy ways to see a 2-5-1. The first is when you have a major 7 chord, look at the 2 chords before it and see if it is in fact the 2, the 5 leading to the 1. Another way is when you have a minor 7 chord followed by a dominant 7th chord followed by a major 7th. And of course, that's what we have here, F sharp minor 7, B7, and E major 7. And the third way is when you see chords moving in fourths, going counterclockwise around the circle of fifths. So we have F sharp minor 7, going to B7, going to E major 7. So F sharp, going to B, going to E. You're going to see that pattern a lot, going in fourths counterclockwise around the circle of fifths. So our first tonal center is E major 7, pretty simple. Now the next chord is also a major 7th chord. Now we have already established that the first tonal center is E major, so the E major scale. So that A major 7 is working together with the E major 7. It is not its own tonal center. Now this is also very common. When you see 2 major 7th chords right next to each other, it should set off alarm bells that these chords are working together. And the first one is the 1 chord, the tonic chord, the root chord, and the next major 7th chord oftentimes is going to be the 4 chord, and it's going to act as a transition going into the next tonal center. So if we are in the key of E major, we have E, F sharp, G sharp, A. So as you can see, that next chord is an A major 7. So that chord is acting as the transition. It's the 4 chord. It's acting as the transition into the next tonal center. Having a major 7th 4 chord, which is a transition chord, is very common in jazz standards. You can also hear that sound in the tune all the things you are. If you'd like to get really good at analyzing chords and finding tonal centers and improvising over those chord progressions, then I'd like to invite you to check out the Scott Paddock Sax School. In my sax school, I dive really deep into teaching you how to work your way through chords, how to analyze chords, how all the chords go together, and of course, how to improvise over those chords. In the sax school, I have several different courses that are dedicated to improvisation at all different levels, starting at the very beginning. So if this is something that you're interested in getting really good at, check out the Scott Paddock Sax School. I'll put a link in the video description below. Now here's something that you need to know about a major 4 chord that is acting as a transition. So it's coming after the major 1 chord. When you have that major 4 chord, in this case the A major 7, after the 1 chord, in this case the E major 7, that A major 7, that 4 chord, is going to be based on the Lydian scale. The Lydian scale has a raised 4th, so we use the Lydian scale on that major 4 chord so that we are in the same key or tonal center as the 1. So E major 7 has 4 sharps, F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, and D sharp. A major 7 has 3 sharps, F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. We want to add in that D sharp so that it has the same key signature as the 1. So this gives us the Lydian mode. So we're playing from A to A with F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, and D sharp. Now this is where things can get a little confusing. Why isn't there something in the chord symbol telling us that this A major 7 is Lydian? Why don't they put a sharp 4 or more appropriately a sharp 11? Because we are adding that sharp 4, which is also known as the 11, the sharp 11th. They do not put the sharp 11 in the chord because if you wrote A major 7 sharp 11, that would tell the chord players to add that sharp 11 into the chord that they were playing, and that would give us some dissonance that we don't want in this transition chord. So as an improviser, you have to be able to recognize when your major 7 chord is acting as a 4 chord and use that Lydian scale. But it's not going to be written in the chord progression very often because we don't want that sharp 11 actually played in the chord. That sharp 11 gives it a lot of dissonance. And we don't want that in the chord. So for our first tonal center, this is what it sounds like. Now, let's talk about these problem chords, the D sharp minor 7, flat 5, and the G sharp 7. Now, again, I've talked about chords that should ring alarm bells for you. And when you have a minor 7 flat 5 chord, that should be a major alarm. So a minor 7 flat 5 is also known as half diminished. So you're going to hear me call it both when I'm talking about this chord. So when you have a minor 7 flat 5 chord, oftentimes that is the 2 in a minor 2 5 1. So if we look at the 1, which would be the C sharp minor, you can see that the D sharp is the 2nd degree of C sharp. The G sharp 7 is the 5th degree of C sharp. And of course, the C sharp is the 1st degree of the C sharp minor chord. So the reason these are called D sharp and G sharp is because those are the notes that are in the C sharp minor scale. There is not an E flat or an A flat in the C sharp minor scale. So if we call that E flat minor 7 flat 5, it just doesn't make any sense. So we need to call it by the way it's acting in the tonal center of C sharp minor. So that's why we are going to call this chord a D sharp minor 7 flat 5 and a G sharp 7. Now, if you want, you can cross out the D sharp minor 7 flat 5 and write in an E flat minor 7 flat 5. But I would suggest getting really comfortable with the numbering of the tonal centers. It's going to make your life a whole lot easier if you can think of that D sharp as being your 2, that G sharp as being your 5, and of course the C sharp as being your 1. Now on this lead sheet for the C sharp minor chord, it does not list the 7, but anyone who is playing the song would add in the 7. So it would be C sharp minor 7. So this is just a lead sheet from an old real book, but the actual chord progression would be D sharp minor 7 flat 5, G sharp 7, and of course C sharp minor 7. So let's do a quick recap of the first 8 measures of Autumn Leaves. We start off with a major 2-5-1 with a tonal center of E major. Then we have a transition on the 4 chord, which of course is A major 7. For that A major 7, you would be thinking Lydian, your Lydian scale, but you're not going to have the sharp 4 in the chord symbol. Then we transition into the C sharp minor 2-5-1, so you're going to have a tonal center of C sharp minor. This is why when it comes to analyzing chords, you need to have the constant mantra that chords are never random, they are always working together. If you'd like me to break down the chord progressions to any other jazz standards, leave me the name of the tune in the comment section below. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. If you would like to dive deeper into my saxophone world, come check me out at the Scott Paddock Sax School.